I never thought my own daughter would try to make me homeless at 68 years old. After letting Sarah and her family move into my home during their financial crisis, I woke up one morning to find eviction papers on my kitchen table. My name was on them. The house I'd paid off over 40 years, where I'd raised my children and tended my garden, was apparently no longer mine. But they made one critical mistake. They didn't know about the fireproof box hidden in my attic that contained a single document that would change everything. My name is Eleanor Wilson. I'm 68 years old and live in a modest 3-bedroom house in Millfield, a quiet suburb outside of Columbus, Ohio. I've never been one for extravagance. My late husband James and I believed in living within our means, saving for rainy days, and paying off our debts before buying anything new. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. We bought this house when we were both 28, with a 30-year mortgage that we managed to pay off early through careful budgeting and extra payments whenever possible. James worked as a high school science teacher, and I was a nurse at the local hospital. We weren't wealthy by any standard, but we were comfortable. We raised 2 children here, my son Michael, who now lives in Seattle with his wife, and my daughter Sarah, who settled just 30 minutes away in Columbus proper. When James passed, away 6 years ago from heart failure, I chose to stay in our home. Some friends suggested I downsize to something more manageable, but every corner of this house holds memories I wasn't ready to part with. The height markers on the kitchen doorframe tracking the children's growth. The slight dent in the living room wall from when Michael was learning to ride his skateboard indoors, against our explicit instructions. The garden James and I planted, together where I still grow his favorite tomatoes every summer. Living alone wasn't always easy, but I managed. My nursing pension and James's teacher's pension provided enough for me to maintain the house and live comfortably. I kept busy with my garden, my book club, volunteer work at the hospital, and weekly dinners with Sarah and her family. I was content with my quiet life and the independence I'd worked so hard to maintain. Sarah is my youngest. She always had a vibrant personality, quick to laugh, quick to cry, and always determined to get her way. As a child, she was the one who could charm James into an extra cookie before dinner or convince me to let her stay up just 15 more minutes on school nights. Her persuasiveness served her well as she grew up, helping her excel in debate, club, and eventually leading her to become a sales manager at a local furniture company. She married Rob when she was 26. He's a pleasant enough man who works in construction, though he's had trouble maintaining steady employment over the years. They have twin boys, Jason and Alex, who are now 12 years old. They're good kids, though they have their grandmother's energy and their mother's stubbornness multiplied by 2. I always thought Sarah had inherited our practical approach to finances, but as she got older, I noticed concerning patterns. She and Rob seemed to live paycheck to paycheck despite their combined income being substantially higher than what James and I had ever made. They bought a house they could barely afford in an upscale neighborhood. They leased new cars every few years. The boys were enrolled in expensive summer camps and private sports leagues. Whenever I gently suggested more careful financial planning, Sarah would smile and assure me they were fine, and that I didn't need to worry about modern finances. It was a subtle but clear message. My advice was outdated and unnecessary. The first signs of trouble came about 8 months ago. Sarah called me on a Wednesday evening, her voice tight with stress. "Mom, I need to talk to you about something important. Can Rob and I come over tomorrow night?" They arrived looking exhausted. Over cups of tea at my kitchen table, they explained their situation. Rob had been laid off 3 months earlier. The construction company he worked for had lost a major contract. Sarah's furniture store was also struggling with decreasing sales due to online competition. They'd been covering expenses with credit cards while looking for solutions. "We've cut back everywhere we can," Sarah explained, though I noticed her designer handbag on the chair and the new smartwatch on Rob's wrist. "But we're 3 months behind on the mortgage, and the bank is threatening foreclosure." I felt my chest tighten. "Oh, Sarah, why didn't you tell me sooner?" "We thought we could handle it," Rob said, staring into his tea. "We didn't want to worry you." Sarah reached across the table and took my hand. "Mom, we've been thinking. This house has 3 bedrooms and you're here all alone. What if we sold our house before the bank takes it and moved in here for a while? Just until Rob finds steady work again and we save enough for a fresh start." Hesitated. My home was my sanctuary, my private space organized exactly how I liked it. The thought of sharing it with 4 people, including 2 energetic preteens, was daunting. But they were family, and they were in trouble. "We would contribute to utilities and groceries," Sarah added quickly. "And the boys could take the small bedroom while Rob and I use the guest room. You wouldn't have to change anything about your routine." "How long do you think this arrangement would last?" I asked. 6 months, maybe a year at most, Sarah assured me. "Just until we're back on our feet. It would really save us, Mom." Looking at their worried faces, how could I say no? They were my family, and this house had always been a place of shelter and love. If I could help them through a difficult time, wasn't that what James would have wanted me to do? "Of course you can stay here," I said finally. "We'll make it work." The relief on Sarah's face was immediate. She jumped up and hugged me tightly. "Thank you, Mom. You're saving us. We'll make this as easy for you as possible, I promise." They moved in 3 weeks later, after selling their house in a rushed sale that barely covered their mortgage. From the beginning, it was clear that my quiet, orderly life would never be the same. The twins filled the house with noise and motion. Their video games blared from the living room television that had rarely been turned on before. Soccer cleats and backpacks cluttered the entryway. The refrigerator, once neatly organized with my weekly meal prep, became a chaotic collection of everyone's favorite foods. Sarah tried to establish some order at first. She created chore charts for the boys and scheduled family meetings to discuss household issues. But within a month, these systems had fallen by the wayside. When I gently reminded her about our agreement that they would contribute to household expenses, she always had a reason why they couldn't that month. Unexpected car repairs. The boys needed new school supplies. Rob was between paychecks from his temporary jobs. Slowly, I found myself retreating to my bedroom more often, the only space that remained truly mine. My routines were constantly disrupted. My book club friends stopped coming over for our monthly meetings because the house was too chaotic. My favorite armchair, where I used to sit each morning with my coffee and crossword puzzle, became the boys' gaming spot. Even my garden suffered as footballs repeatedly landed on delicate plants despite my pleas for more careful play. 3 months into this arrangement, subtle changes began occurring that made me increasingly uneasy. Sarah started rearranging furniture without asking me first. "This layout makes more sense for the family," she explained when I questioned why my antique side table had been moved to the basement. My kitchen cabinets were reorganized to make room for their snacks and appliances. Family photographs were replaced with their own pictures. When I raised concerns, Sarah would sigh. "Mom, we're trying to make this work for everyone. You need to be more flexible." 4 months in, I overheard a conversation between Sarah and Rob that sent a chill through me. I was in the garden, and they were on the back porch, unaware that I could hear them through the open window. "We're never going to save enough to move out at this rate," Rob was saying. "I know," Sarah replied, her voice low. "But I've been thinking, this house is way too big for Mom anyway. She can barely handle the stairs some days with her arthritis. What are you suggesting?" "Well, what if we convinced her to sign the house over to us? We could take out a home equity loan to pay off our debts. She could still live here, of course, maybe in the small bedroom. It would be better for everyone." "Do you think she'd go for that?" Rob asked. "She might need some convincing," Sarah said. "But she's always put family first. I'll talk to her about it this weekend." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I stood frozen among my tomato plants, dirt still clinging to my gardening gloves. The house that James and I had worked so hard to pay off, that contained all. Our memories, that was supposed to be my security in old age. Sarah wanted to take ownership of it. Not just stay temporarily as we'd agreed, but make it permanently hers. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about James and what he would advise. He had always been the more assertive one in our relationship, the one who could firmly say no when necessary. I had always been the peacekeeper, the one who compromised to avoid conflict. But some things shouldn't be compromised on. The next morning, I called Michael in Seattle. We hadn't spoken in a few weeks, and he was surprised to hear the stress in my voice. "Mom, what's going on? Are you okay?" I explained the situation, Sarah's family moving in, the gradual takeover of my home, and the conversation I'd overheard. "You need to confront her," Michael said immediately. "This was supposed to be temporary. They can't just decide to take your house." "I don't want to create more conflict," I admitted. "They're already under so much stress, and the boys—" "Mom." Michael's voice was gentle but firm. "This isn't about creating conflict. This is about protecting yourself. Dad would never want you to be pushed out of your own home." He was right, of course. But confrontation had never been my strong suit, especially with Sarah, who could twist conversations around until I found myself apologizing for things that weren't my fault. "I'll come visit next month," Michael offered. "We can talk to Sarah, together." That gave me some comfort, but I knew I needed to address the situation before then. I decided to approach Sarah that weekend, to calmly remind her of our original agreement, and make it clear that transferring ownership of the house was not an option. But Sarah approached me first. On Saturday morning, as I was preparing my tea, she sat down across from me at the kitchen table with a serious expression. "Mom, I want to talk to you about something important," she began. "Rob and I have been discussing our situation, and we've come to a conclusion that we think will benefit everyone." She reached for my hand, her expression full of practiced concern. "Mom, this house is really too much for you to manage on your own. The stairs, the large yard, all the maintenance. It's a lot for someone your age." I bristled at "someone your age," but let her continue. "We think it would make sense for you to transfer the house into our names," she said. "You could still live here, of course, but we could take responsibility for the upkeep, and it would give us the stability we need. For the boys, we could take out a small loan against the equity to pay off our debts and finally get back on our feet." I pulled my hand away gently. "Sarah, that wasn't our agreement. You said this arrangement was temporary, remember? 6 months to a year, at most." Her expression hardened slightly. "Well, situations change, Mom. We've realized it's going to take longer than we thought to recover financially. And honestly, this solution is best for everyone. You're getting older, and eventually, you'll need more help." "I'm only 68, Sarah. I'm still perfectly capable of managing my own home and my own affairs," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm happy to have you stay longer if you need to, but transferring ownership is not an option." Sarah's face shifted into the look I knew well, the determined expression she got when she wasn't going to take no for an answer. "Mom, I think you're being unreasonable. This isn't just about you anymore. It's about what's best for the whole family." "The house is not for negotiation, Sarah," I said more firmly. "Your father and I worked for decades to pay it off. It's my security for the future." She stood up, clearly frustrated. "I thought you cared about our security too, the boys' security. But I see you're still stuck in the past, thinking only about yourself." She walked away before I could respond, leaving me sitting alone at the kitchen table, my tea growing cold. That night, dinner was tense. Sarah barely spoke to me, and Rob kept giving me disappointed looks, as if I had failed some test of family loyalty. For the next week, a cold war descended on the house. Sarah began leaving real estate brochures for senior living communities on the coffee table. Rob started pointedly mentioning repairs the house needed that were probably too much for Eleanor to handle. The twins, sensing the tension, became quieter around me, as if they'd been told I was the villain in this story. I tried to maintain my normal routines, but the atmosphere was suffocating. I called Michael again, and he promised to come sooner if possible, but his work schedule made it difficult to get away immediately. Then, on a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks after our conversation, everything changed. I had gone to my weekly volunteer shift at the hospital. When I returned home in the afternoon, Sarah and Rob were sitting at the kitchen table with a man in a suit I didn't recognize. Papers were spread out before them. "Mom," Sarah said brightly, as if our recent tension had never existed. "This is Mr. Davidson. He's a lawyer helping us sort out some paperwork. Come join us." Confused, I set down my purse and took a seat at the table. Mr. Davidson nodded politely at me. "Mrs. Wilson, we're just reviewing the final details here," he said, sliding some documents toward me. "Once you sign these, we can proceed with the property transfer and the new living arrangements." I looked down at the papers, my blood running, cold as I realized what they were. Power of attorney forms, property transfer documents, and most shockingly, eviction papers with my name listed as the person to be evicted. "What is this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Mom, try not to get upset," Sarah said soothingly. "We've talked about this. The house is too much for you. We've found a nice senior apartment complex just 10 minutes away. It's perfect for your needs. No stairs, no maintenance, and a community of people your own age." I stared at her in disbelief. "Sarah, we never discussed this. You want me to sign over my house and move out? This is just a necessary transition," Rob finished for me. "Sarah has your best interests at heart." I stood up, my hands shaking. "I'm not signing anything. This is my home, and I'm not leaving." Sarah's pleasant expression slipped. "Mom, don't be difficult. We've already put down a deposit on the apartment. Your stubbornness is costing us money." "We don't have." "I never agreed to any of this," I said, finding my voice growing stronger. "And I think you should all leave my house now." Mr. Davidson looked uncomfortable. "Perhaps we should reschedule when Mrs. Wilson is feeling more cooperative." "That won't be necessary," I said firmly. "There will be no rescheduling because there will be no property transfer. Now please leave." Sarah stood up, anger flashing in her eyes. "Mom, you're being ridiculous. We're trying to help you." "No, Sarah. You're trying to take my home," I replied, "and I want all of you out of my house. Right now." Mr. Davidson gathered his papers quickly, murmuring something about family matters and showing himself out. Rob followed him, leaving Sarah and me alone in the kitchen. "This isn't over," she said quietly. "You clearly aren't thinking clearly anymore. Maybe it's time we discussed guardianship too." With that threat hanging in the air, she walked out, leaving me standing alone in my kitchen, the eviction papers still on the table with my name clearly visible at the top. I collapsed into a chair, my heart pounding. Guardianship. She was threatening to have me declared incompetent, to take away not just my home but my independence entirely. All because I wouldn't give her what she wanted? For the first time since this ordeal began, I felt something beyond hurt and confusion. I felt anger. Pure, clarifying anger that burned away my hesitation and people-pleasing tendencies. I knew then that I needed to act decisively to protect myself. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying Sarah's threat in my mind, each word cutting deeper than the last. The thought that my own daughter would consider having me declared incompetent sent waves of anxiety through my body. I'd heard horror stories of elderly people losing their autonomy through guardianship proceedings, their finances controlled, their homes sold, their lives dictated by others. I refused to become one of those stories. In the early morning light, I made a decision. I needed help, professional help, before Sarah could take further action. But first, I needed to secure the one thing that could protect me from her schemes. I waited until the house was empty. Sarah had taken the twins to school and then headed to work. Rob had left for a construction site where he'd picked up temporary work. Once I was certain I was alone, I climbed the narrow stairs to the attic, moving carefully to avoid the steps that creaked. The attic was stuffy and dim, filled with cardboard boxes of holiday decorations, old photo albums, and memorabilia from the children's school years. I headed straight for the far corner, where a chest of drawers stood partially hidden behind an old artificial Christmas tree. I pulled open the bottom drawer and reached to the back, feeling for the small metal box James and I had hidden there years ago. The fireproof box wasn't much to look at, just a simple gray container with a combination lock, but its contents were priceless. Inside were our most important documents: birth certificates, marriage license, insurance policies, and the document I now desperately needed, the deed to our house. James had always been meticulous about paperwork. "Keep originals safe and make copies," he'd say. "You never know when you'll need proof." His foresight had saved us more than once during our marriage, and now it might save me again. With trembling fingers, I entered the combination, our wedding anniversary, and opened the box. There, among the neatly organized papers, was the deed showing that James and I were the sole owners of the property. After his death, the house had transferred fully to me. There had never been any co-owners, no claims that could be made by anyone else. The property was mine alone. I carefully removed the deed and several other important documents, including my will and power of attorney forms that named Michael, not Sarah, as my designated representative in case of incapacity. I hadn't looked at these papers in years, but James's insistence on proper estate planning was proving invaluable now. I tucked everything into a large envelope and hid it in my bedroom closet, behind a stack of sweaters Sarah would never touch. Then I made a single phone call to Patricia Morgan, a retired attorney who had been part of my hospital volunteer group for years. I explained my situation in hushed tones, fearful of being overheard even though I was alone. "Eleanor, what you're describing is elder abuse," Patricia said firmly. "Financial exploitation by family members is unfortunately common, but that doesn't make it legal or acceptable." Her words made me flinch. Elder abuse. Those words seemed too harsh, too formal for what was happening within my family. But she was right. Sarah and Rob were attempting to take advantage of me because of my age, using manipulation and now threats to try to secure my most valuable asset. "What should I do?" I asked, my voice small. "First, do not sign anything," Patricia advised. "Second, we need to get you proper legal representation immediately. I'm retired, but I know several excellent elder law attorneys. Third, you need to document everything: dates, conversations, threats. And fourth, you should consider asking them to leave your home." "I can't just throw them out," I protested. "They're still my family. The boys—" "Eleanor," Patricia interrupted gently. "They were planning to throw you out of your own home. They had eviction papers drawn up. This isn't a misunderstanding. It's a calculated attempt to take your property." I knew she was right, but the thought of confronting Sarah again, of potentially fracturing our family beyond repair, made my chest tighten painfully. "Can I think about it just for a day or two?" Patricia sighed. "Of course, but don't wait too long. These situations can escalate quickly. I'll email you the contact information for 3 attorneys I trust. Promise me you'll call one of them tomorrow." "I promise," I said, and I meant it. After our call, I went to my bedroom and began writing down everything I could remember: when Sarah and her family had moved in, the gradual changes to my home, the conversation I'd overheard in the garden, Sarah's proposal that I transfer the house, and finally, the shocking discovery of the eviction papers. Seeing it all laid out chronologically made the pattern of manipulation unmistakable. That evening, an uncomfortable silence filled the house. Sarah and Rob spoke to each other but barely acknowledged me. The twins, sensing the tension, stayed in their room playing video games. I prepared a simple dinner for myself, eating alone at the kitchen counter while they ordered pizza. As I washed my single plate and cup, Sarah approached me. "Mom, I think we need to talk about what happened earlier." I dried my hands slowly, buying time to steady my nerves. "Yes, we do." "You overreacted," she said, her tone suggesting she was speaking to a child rather than her mother. "Mr. Davidson was just here to discuss options. Nobody was forcing you to sign anything." I met her gaze. "There were eviction papers, Sarah, with my name on them." She waved her hand dismissively. "Those were just drafts, part of the package of documents for different scenarios. We would never actually evict you." "Then why prepare the papers at all?" I asked. She hesitated, caught in the contradiction. "Legal processes are complicated. Mr. Davidson likes to be thorough." "Sarah," I said quietly, "I want to believe you have my best interests at heart, but everything that's happened in the past few months suggests otherwise." Her expression hardened. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means that you promised this arrangement would be temporary, but now you're trying to take my house. It means that instead of contributing to expenses, as agreed, you've been planning to move me out. It means that when I refused, you threatened guardianship proceedings." "I never threatened," she began, but I cut her off. "You said, and I quote, 'Maybe it's time we discussed guardianship.' What else could that possibly mean, Sarah?" She looked away, unable to meet my eyes. "You're twisting my words. We're just trying to find a solution that works for everyone." "No," I corrected her. "You're trying to find a solution that works for you, at my expense. And I won't allow it." Sarah's face flushed with anger. "You've always been stubborn, Mom, always thinking you know better than everyone else. This house is too big for you. The upkeep is too much. You're being completely unreasonable." "It's my house," I said simply. "Paid for with decades of hard work by your father and me. I decide what happens to it, not you." She stormed off without another word. Later that night, I heard heated whispers between her and Rob, though I couldn't make out what they were saying. The next morning, I called one of the attorneys Patricia had recommended, Eleanor Jacobson, who specialized in elder law and estate planning. Ms. Jacobson's office was able to see me that same afternoon. I told Sarah I had a doctor's appointment, not wanting to reveal my true destination. The attorney listened carefully to my story, occasionally taking notes, her expression growing increasingly concerned. "Mrs. Wilson, based on what you've told me, your daughter and son-in-law have no legal right to your property," she assured me. "But their actions, particularly the prepared eviction papers and guardianship threat, are serious and concerning." "What should I do?" I asked, the same question I'd posed to Patricia. "We need to act quickly to protect your assets and your autonomy," she replied. "First, I recommend changing the locks on your house. It's your property, and you have every right to control access to it." The suggestion startled me. Change the locks on my own children? That seems so drastic. "Mrs. Wilson," Ms. Jacobson said gently, "your daughter was preparing to evict you from your own home. Changing the locks is not drastic, it's prudent." She continued outlining a plan. We would send a formal letter demanding that Sarah and her family vacate the premises within 30 days. We would file a restraining order if necessary. We would update my will and power of attorney documents to explicitly exclude Sarah from any decision-making capacity. We would notify my bank and financial institutions to be on alert for suspicious activity. It all felt overwhelming and heartbreaking. How had we reached this point? How had my daughter, whom I'd rocked to sleep as a baby, taught to ride a bike, and comforted through her first heartbreak, become someone who would try to take everything from me? One more thing, Ms. Jacobson added. Do you have the original deed to your house? I nodded, relieved that I'd had the foresight to retrieve it from the attic. Yes, it's safe. Good. Bring it to our next appointment. We'll make certified copies and file them with the county recorder's office to ensure there can be no question about ownership. As I left her office, I felt a strange mixture of sorrow and resolve. The path ahead would be difficult, but for the first time in months, I felt like I had some control over my situation. The following day was a Friday. Sarah and Rob both worked, and the twins had school. I had arranged for a locksmith to come at 10 a.m. The man who arrived was professional and non-judgmental when I explained that I needed all the locks changed on my house. Happens more often than you'd think, he said kindly as he worked on the front door. Sometimes family situations get complicated. By noon, I had new keys to my front and back doors, garage, and basement entrance. I placed one set in my purse and another in the fireproof box in the attic, replacing the deed which was now safely stored at Ms. Jacobson's office. At 2:30 p.m., a courier delivered the formal notice to vacate that Ms. Jacobson had prepared. I placed it on the kitchen table where Sarah and Rob would see it when they returned home. Then I waited, my heart pounding with anxiety. Sarah arrived first, at around 5:15 p.m. I heard her key in the lock, followed by confusion when it wouldn't. Turn. She rang the doorbell repeatedly. When I opened the door, her expression shifted from irritation to shock as she saw the official-looking envelope in my hand. "Mom, why doesn't my key work?" she demanded. I handed her the envelope. "I've changed the lock, Sarah, and this is a formal notice requiring you and your family to vacate my home within 30 days. She stared at me in disbelief, then tore open the envelope. As she scanned the document, her face contorted with rage. "You're evicting us? Your own family? How could you?" "The same way you were planning to evict me," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. "The difference is that this is legally my house, and I have every right to decide who lives in it." "You've lost your mind," she hissed. "You'll regret this. You think you can manage on your own? Wait until you fall on the stairs with no one to help you." Her words were meant to hurt, to instill fear, but they only strengthened my resolve. "I've spoken with an attorney, Sarah. If you continue with threats or attempts to take my property, we'll pursue legal action, including a restraining order." "We have nowhere to go," she shouted, her voice cracking. "What about the boys? Where are they supposed to live?" "You have 30 days to find a place," I said. "That's more notice than you were planning to give me. And I'll give you a set of the new keys to use until you move out. But I expect them returned when you leave." Rob arrived home during this confrontation, quickly grasping the situation from Sarah's distress and the legal document now crumpled in her hand. He attempted a different approach, his voice calm and reasonable. "Eleanor, let's all take a step. Back here. There's no need for lawyers and eviction notices. We can work this out as a family." "We tried that, Rob," I replied. "You and Sarah made your intentions very clear when you brought that lawyer with eviction papers. I'm simply protecting myself." The twins came home from a friend's house shortly after, confused by the tension and Sarah's tears. I hadn't wanted them caught in the middle of this, but Sarah immediately pulled them into the conflict. "Grandma is kicking us out," she told them, her voice breaking dramatically. "We have nowhere to go." Alex looked at me with confusion and hurt in his eyes. "Why are you making us leave, Grandma?" Before I could answer, Jason jumped in. "Is it because of the plants I accidentally trampled? I said I was sorry." My heart ached for them. They were innocent in all this, caught in a situation created by their parents' poor choices and attempted manipulation. "This isn't about plants or noise or anything you boys have done," I assured them. "This is about grown-up problems between me and your parents. I love you both very much, and that will never change." That evening was tense and tearful. Sarah alternated between angry outbursts and tearful pleas. Rob made several attempts to reason with me, each time suggesting slightly different arrangements that still involved them taking partial ownership of my home. The twins retreated to their room, confused and upset. As I lay in bed that night, listening to the muffled sounds of Sarah and Rob arguing, I wondered if I had made the right decision. The pain of family conflict weighed heavily on my heart. But when I remembered the eviction papers with my name on them, when I thought of Sarah's casual dismissal of my autonomy, I knew I had no choice. Sometimes protecting yourself means making difficult, painful choices, even when those choices involve the people you love most. The days that followed my confrontation with Sarah were filled with uncomfortable silences and tense encounters. The house that had once been my sanctuary now felt like a battlefield, with invisible lines drawn between rooms and unspoken rules about when shared spaces could be used. I would wait until Sarah and Rob left for work before venturing into the kitchen for breakfast. They would delay dinner until I had retreated to my bedroom for the evening. The twins, caught in the middle, began spending more time at friends' houses, clearly uncomfortable with the Cold War developing under our roof. 1 week after I delivered the eviction notice, I came downstairs one morning to find my living room transformed. Family photos had been removed from the mantel, replaced by Sarah's modern art pieces. The curtains I had sewn myself had been taken down, replaced by sleek blinds I'd never seen before. Even my comfortable floral armchair, James's favorite, had been moved to the garage and replaced with a leather recliner. "What happened to my living room?" I asked when Sarah emerged from the kitchen. She shrugged, not meeting my eyes. "Since we're being forced to move, we're preparing by setting up our furniture. We'll need to see what fits in a smaller place." "But my things are all safe in the garage," she interrupted. "Nothing's been damaged, just relocated." I stood there, speechless at the audacity. This was more than a practical consideration for their eventual move. It was a power play, a way to assert control over the space despite my legal ownership. Rather than escalate the conflict, I retreated to the garden, my one remaining sanctuary. As I tended to my tomato plants, I called Ms. Jacobson from my cell phone, explaining the situation. "Document everything," she advised. "Take photos of the changes they're making. This demonstrates a pattern of disregard for your property rights that will strengthen our case if we need to expedite the eviction." I followed her advice, discreetly photographing the altered living room, the stacks of my belongings in the garage, and even the kitchen pantry where my organized system had been completely rearranged. I sent everything to Ms. Jacobson's office, via email. That afternoon, I received an unexpected call from Michael in Seattle. "Mom, what's going on?" "Sarah just called me in tears saying you've lost your mind and are throwing her family out on the street." I took a deep breath, preparing to explain the situation calmly. But my voice cracked with emotion as I described the events of the past months. The gradual takeover of my home, the lawyer with eviction papers, Sarah's guardianship threat. "She had eviction papers drawn up for you?" Michael's tone shifted from concern to disbelief. "In your own house?" "Yes," I confirmed. "And when I refused to sign over the property, she suggested pursuing guardianship to declare me incompetent." A long silence followed, broken only by what sounded like Michael's deep, controlled breathing, something he'd done since childhood when trying to manage anger. "I'm coming home," he finally said. "I'll be on the first flight tomorrow morning." "Michael, you don't need to—" "I do, Mom. This has gone far enough. I should have been there sooner." True to his word, Michael arrived the following day. When I opened the door to his familiar face, so much like his father's, the composure I'd been maintaining for weeks crumbled. I fell into his embrace, sobbing like I hadn't allowed myself to do since this ordeal began. "It's okay, Mom," he murmured, stroking my hair the way I had once comforted him. "I'm here now. We'll sort this out." Sarah and Rob were at work, but they returned early after Michael texted to say he had arrived. The confrontation I had dreaded unfolded in my kitchen, the heart of the home that was now the center of our conflict. "So you've flown in to take sides," Sarah said bitterly when she saw Michael. "Typical. Mom always did favor you. Michael's expression remained calm, though I could see tension in his jaw. I'm not here to take sides, Sarah. I'm here because our mother is being threatened with eviction from her own home by her daughter. That's not something I can ignore from 3,000 miles away. You don't understand the situation, Rob interjected. Eleanor isn't capable of maintaining this house anymore. We were trying to help by preparing legal documents to force her out? Michael's voice remained level, but his words were pointed. By threatening guardianship when she refused to give you what you wanted? That's not help. That's exploitation. Sarah's face flushed red. That's not what happened. Mom is twisting everything to make us look bad. We offered her a perfectly nice senior apartment. That I never asked for, I added quietly. And never. Agreed to. Michael placed a hand on my shoulder. Look, I've spoken with Mom's attorney. I've seen the notice to vacate. This isn't up for debate anymore. You have 23 days left to find new accommodations. With what money? Sarah demanded. We sold our house to move here. We have nowhere to go. That's not Mom's problem to solve, Michael replied. You're both employed adults. Figure it out, the way Mom and Dad did when they were starting out. The conversation deteriorated from there, with Sarah alternating between tearful pleas about family loyalty and angry accusations about my mental fitness. Rob attempted to position himself as the voice of reason, suggesting compromises that still involved them maintaining some claim to my property. Michael remained firm, supporting my decision without escalating the emotional tension. After an exhausting hour, Sarah and Rob retreated to their room. Michael helped me make a simple dinner, and we ate in relative silence, both processing the confrontation. I'm sorry, I said finally. I never wanted to put you in this position, to force you to choose sides between your mother and your sister. Michael reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You didn't put me in any position, Mom. Sarah did that when she tried to take advantage of you. There are no sides here. There's just right and wrong. His words lifted a weight I hadn't realized I'd been carrying, the fear that by standing up for myself, I was somehow being the unreasonable one, the selfish one, the bad mother. Michael had taken 2 weeks off work to help me through this transition. During his first few days, he accompanied me to meetings with Ms. Jacobson, where we reviewed and updated all my legal documents. We made my medical directive explicit, naming Michael as my healthcare proxy should I ever become incapacitated. We updated my will to ensure my wishes regarding the house were crystal clear. We even set up a small trust that would provide for the twins' college education, but could not be accessed by Sarah or Rob for any other purpose. This way, Ms. Jacobson explained, you can still support your grandchildren's future without risking exploitation. Michael also helped me retrieve my belongings from the garage and restore my living room to its original state, replacing Sarah's modern decor with my comfortable furniture and cherished photographs. When Sarah protested, Michael stood firm. This is Mom's house, he reminded her. You're guests here for 20 more days, not redecorators. The twins, initially confused and upset about the family conflict, began to spend more time with me and Michael once they realized we weren't the villains Sarah had portrayed us to be. Michael taught them how to play chess, a game his father had taught him at their age. I showed them James's old coin collection, telling stories about each piece that made their grandfather come alive for them in a way he hadn't before. One evening, I overheard Alex ask Sarah, "Why can't we just stay in our room at Grandma's house and visit sometimes? Why do we have to take the whole house?" Sarah's response was too quiet for me to hear, but Alex's follow-up was clear. But it's Grandma's house. Didn't she and Grandpa pay for it a long time ago? The simplicity of a child's logic cut through all the justifications and manipulations. Out of the mouths of babes, indeed. 2 weeks into Michael's stay, Sarah and Rob announced they had found an apartment about 20 minutes away. It was smaller than they wanted and more expensive than they'd hoped, but it was available immediately. We'll be moving out this weekend, Sarah informed us, her tone making it clear she considered this a personal sacrifice rather than compliance with a legal requirement. The boys will have to share a bedroom again. I felt a pang of guilt that quickly dissipated when she added, I hope you're happy now, Mom. You've forced your grandchildren into cramped quarters just so you can rattle around in this big house by yourself. Michael, who had developed remarkable patience through this ordeal, interjected before I could respond. The boys will adapt, Sarah. Kids are resilient, and Mom has offered to host them for visits and sleepovers whenever you and they would like. Sarah left the room without acknowledging his comment. The next few days were a flurry of packing and preparations. I stayed out of their way as much as possible, giving them space to pack their belongings without my hovering presence adding tension to an already difficult situation. The morning of their departure arrived with a somber atmosphere. The twins hugged me tightly, their young faces troubled by a situation they couldn't fully comprehend. We'll see you soon, right, Grandma? Jason asked anxiously. Of course you will, I assured him, smoothing his hair. This is still your grandmother's house, and you're welcome anytime. Sarah remained cold and distant during the loading of their possessions into a rented moving truck. Rob made perfunctory farewells, clearly eager to be done with the awkwardness. As they prepared to leave, I approached Sarah with a small envelope. What's this? She asked suspiciously. A housewarming gift, I said. Not much, just enough to help with some of the initial expenses. She opened the envelope to find a check for $2,000, a significant amount for me, but one I could manage. For a moment, her composure cracked, and I glimpsed the daughter I remembered, the one who had once valued family connections over material gains. Thank you, she said quietly, quickly tucking the check into her purse. The boys will want to visit next weekend if that's okay. It wasn't an apology, nowhere near the reconciliation I hoped for, but it was a small opening, an acknowledgement that our relationship wasn't completely severed. That would be wonderful, I replied, careful not to show too much emotion and risk pushing her away. I'll make their favorite cookies. After they drove away, Michael and I stood in the driveway for a long moment, watching until the moving truck turned the corner and disappeared from view. The house behind us felt suddenly vastly empty, echoing with the absence of the noise and energy that had filled it for the past months. You did the right thing, Mom, Michael said, his arm around my shoulders. It doesn't feel good right now, but you did the right thing. That night, after Michael had gone to bed in his old room, I sat alone in my reclaimed living room. The house was quiet, orderly once again, everything in its proper place. I should have felt triumphant or at least relieved, but instead, I felt a profound sadness. I had won the battle for my home, protected my financial security, and maintained my independence. But at what cost to my relationship with my daughter? Would Sarah ever truly understand why I had to take such drastic measures? Would she recognize that my actions weren't about rejecting her, but about protecting myself from exploitation? I sat in James's old armchair. I found myself talking to him as I often did when facing difficult moments. I wish you were here, I whispered to the empty room. You would know how to fix this. In the stillness that followed, I could almost hear his practical, loving voice in my head. There are some breaks that take time to mend, Ellie. You've done what needed doing. Now patience is your friend. He would be right, of course. The path to healing this family wound wouldn't be quick or easy. It would require time, patience, and perhaps professional help. But the first, crucial step had been taken, establishing clear boundaries that protected my rights and dignity while still leaving room for relationship. I went to bed that night with a mixture of sorrow and hope. The house was mine again, secure and peaceful. The document that had changed everything, the deed proving my ownership, had served its purpose, protecting me from a scheme that could have left me homeless and dependent. Now I faced a different challenge: rebuilding a relationship with my daughter on healthier, more equal terms. It wouldn't be easy, but as I had learned through this ordeal, I was stronger than I had given myself credit for. The weeks following Sarah's departure brought a strange mixture of peace and emptiness to my home. Without the constant noise and activity of 4 additional people, the house felt cavernous at times. I found myself turning on the radio more often, just to fill the silence that sometimes felt more oppressive than comforting. Michael stayed for another week after they moved out, helping me reset the house and establish new routines. We repainted the guest bedroom where Sarah and Rob had stayed, choosing a warm sage green that brightened the space. We rearranged furniture in the twins' former room, creating a cozy reading nook by the window. Small changes, but important ones that reclaimed the spaces as mine while still making them welcoming for future visits. "Are you sure you'll be all right on your own, Mom?" Michael asked on his last evening, his suitcase already packed for his early morning flight back to Seattle. "I managed just fine before they moved in," I reminded him. "And I'll manage now. Besides, I'm not really alone. I have my book club, my volunteer work at the hospital, and my garden." He didn't look entirely convinced. "Promise you'll call if you need anything at all." "I can be on a plane within hours." I hugged him tightly, overwhelmed with gratitude for his unwavering support. "I promise, but I'll be fine. This is my home, remember? The place where I belong." After Michael left, I slowly settled into a new rhythm. The first weekend the twins were scheduled to visit arrived with a flutter of nervous anticipation in my stomach. Would Sarah actually bring them? Would she use this opportunity to create more conflict? To my relief, she arrived punctually on Saturday morning, the boys tumbling out of her car with backpacks and sleeping bags. Her demeanor was cool, but civil. No warmth, but no open hostility either. "I'll pick them up tomorrow afternoon," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "They have everything they need, but call if there's any problem." "We'll be just fine," I assured her. "I've made their favorite cookies and planned a few activities they might enjoy." She nodded stiffly and left. Without further conversation, the twins, initially subdued and watchful, clearly aware of the tension between their mother and grandmother, gradually relaxed as the day progressed. We baked together, played board games, and even started a small fairy garden in a corner of the yard using miniature plants and tiny decorative houses I had found at the garden center. That evening, as we sat on the back porch watching fireflies emerge in the gathering dusk, Jason hesitantly asked the question I had been expecting. "Grandma, why did Mom and Dad try to take your house?" I took a deep breath, careful to frame my response in a way that acknowledged the complexity of the situation without demonizing their parents. "Sometimes adults make decisions based on what they think is best for their family," I explained gently. "Your mom and dad were worried about where you would all live, and they thought sharing my house might be a good solution. But they didn't. Understand that the way they went about it wasn't right. Mom said you kicked us out because you don't want us around," Alex said, his voice small. My heart constricted. "That's not true at all. I love having you visit, and you're welcome here anytime. But this is my home. The home your grandfather and I worked very hard to pay for. Just like your toys belong to you, this house belongs to me. I get to decide who lives here and how it's used." Jason nodded thoughtfully. "Like when Alex uses my stuff without asking, and I get mad." "Something like that," I agreed, smiling at the simple but accurate comparison. "I was happy to help your family when you needed a place to stay temporarily. But when your parents wanted to take over my house permanently, I had to say no." "I miss our old room here," Alex admitted. "The apartment is so small." "You can still use that room whenever you visit," I assured him. "I've kept the bunk beds, though I've added a bookshelf and some comfortable chairs. It's still your space here." The conversation shifted to lighter topics after that. but I sensed that the boys had needed that simple, honest explanation. One that respected their intelligence while preserving their relationship with both me and their parents. When Sarah came to collect them the following afternoon, they ran to her with excited stories about our fairy garden project and the cookies we had baked. For a brief moment, as she listened to their animated chatter, her expression softened. She caught my eye over their heads, and though she didn't smile, she gave a small nod that felt like acknowledgement, perhaps even the beginning of understanding. "Thank you for bringing them," I said as they prepared to leave. It meant a lot, to me. "They wanted to come," she replied, her tone neutral but not cold. "They missed you." It wasn't reconciliation, not yet, but it was a start. A crack in the wall of resentment that had built up between us. 2 months after their move, I received an unexpected call from Rob. His voice sounded strained, hesitant. "Eleanor, I hope. I'm not disturbing you." "Not at all," I replied, curious about the purpose of his call. We hadn't spoken directly since they moved out, all communications going through Sarah or, occasionally, Michael. "I'm calling because—" He paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. "I want to apologize for my part in what happened. The eviction papers, the pressure to sign over the house, it was wrong. I knew it was wrong even as it was happening, but I went along with it because Sarah was so determined." His admission caught me off guard. "Thank you for saying that, Rob. It means a lot to hear. Sarah doesn't know I'm calling," he continued. "She's still pretty angry, but I wanted you to know that I understand why you did what you did. You had every right to protect yourself and your home." "How are things at the apartment?" I asked, genuinely concerned despite everything that had transpired. He sighed. "Tight, financially and space-wise, but we're managing. I've picked up more consistent work with a commercial construction company, and Sarah has been promoted at the furniture store. The boys are adjusting." "I'm glad to hear things are stabilizing," I said sincerely. "There's something else," Robbie added, his voice lowering slightly. "Sarah would never admit this, but seeing how you stood up for yourself, it made an impression on her. She talks sometimes about how you finally showed some backbone after all these years of giving in to everyone else's demands." I wasn't sure whether to feel amused or offended by her characterization, but Rob continued before I could respond. "What I'm trying to say is, I think she respects you more now, even if she's not ready to admit it. She's always seen you as someone who could be easily influenced, someone who would always prioritize keeping the peace over standing up for yourself. Seeing you draw a clear boundary and enforce it, it changed something in how she sees you." After we hung up, I sat with Rob's words for a long while. The idea that my act of self-protection had actually increased Sarah's respect for me was both surprising and oddly validating. Perhaps by refusing to be the self-sacrificing doormat she had come to expect, I had actually improved her perception of me, even as it temporarily damaged our relationship. The following weekend, when Sarah dropped off the twins for their now regular visit, she lingered in the entryway instead of immediately leaving, as had become her habit. "The house looks nice," she commented, glancing around at the familiar space that now contained subtle changes reflecting my reclaimed ownership. "You've done some redecorating." "Just a few touches here and there," I replied cautiously. "Would you like some coffee before you go? I just made a fresh pot." To my surprise, she hesitated only briefly before nodding. "Sure, I have some time." We sat at the kitchen table, that same space where so many difficult conversations had taken place over the past months. The silence between us was awkward, but not hostile. Finally, Sarah spoke, her eyes fixed on her coffee cup. "Rob told me he called you." "Yes," I acknowledged, not sure where she was heading with this. "He shouldn't have done that behind my back," she said, then sighed. "But I guess what he told you wasn't wrong. I was angry when you stood up to us. To me. I still In some ways. But I also— She struggled visibly with the words. I respect that you protected what's yours. Coming from Sarah, this was significant. Not quite an apology, but an acknowledgement that my actions had been justified, even necessary. I never wanted to hurt you, I said carefully. Or make things difficult for your family. I just couldn't. Let anyone take away my home and my independence, even people I love. She nodded slowly. I think I understand that better now. The apartment situation has been educational. Having to manage with less space, less money than we're used to. It's made me realize how much we took for granted before. We talked for nearly an hour that morning, not resolving everything, but beginning to bridge the chasm that had formed between us. Sarah admitted that their financial problems had been largely self-inflicted, the result of living beyond their means for years while ignoring the mounting debt. I shared my own fears about aging and maintaining my independence, explaining why her attempts to take control had felt so threatening. Before she left, Sarah paused at the door. Mom, I can't promise things will ever be completely back to normal. Between us, too much has happened. But I'd like to try to rebuild something, for the boys' sake if nothing else. I'd like that too, I replied, feeling a tentative hope bloom in my chest, for all our sakes. True to her word, Sarah began making small efforts to repair our relationship. She started joining the twins on their weekend visits occasionally, at first staying only for a cup of coffee, then gradually extending to shared meals and activities. Rob came sometimes too, our earlier phone conversation having eased some of the awkwardness between us. 3 months after they moved out, Sarah arrived for one of these visits with a large envelope in hand. After the twins had run off to their room to unpack their overnight bags, she placed it on the kitchen table between us. What's this? I asked, puzzled. Open it, she said, her expression unreadable. Inside was a formal letter from their apartment complex, confirming the termination of their lease, effective in 30 days. You're moving? I asked, confused by her decision to share this with me in such a formal way. Yes, she confirmed. We found a small house for rent about 15 minutes from here. It's not fancy, but it has a yard for the boys and enough bedrooms, so they don't have to share. That's wonderful news, I said sincerely. The boys will love having outdoor space again. There's something else in the envelope, Sarah said, her voice oddly nervous. I looked deeper and found a smaller envelope containing a check, made out to me for $2,000, the exact amount I had given them as a housewarming gift when they moved to the apartment. Sarah, you don't need to repay this. It was a gift. She shook her head firmly. I want to. It's important to me that I do this. She took a deep breath. When we moved into your house, we promised to contribute to expenses and never did. When you gave us that check after everything that happened, it made me feel terrible. Like we had taken and taken from you, and even after we tried to take your house, you were still giving. Tears glistened in her eyes, the first genuine emotion she had shown since our confrontation. I need to start setting things right. This is just the beginning. I pushed the check back toward her. Keep it for your new place. There will be expenses. Things the boys need. No, she insisted. We're doing better financially now. Rob's new job pays well and I've gotten another promotion. We're learning to live within our means, like you and Dad always tried to teach us. She managed a small smile. Better late than never, right? I reached across the table and squeezed her hand, feeling the first real connection we'd had in months. Your father would be proud of you for that. I doubt he'd be proud of how I treated you, she said, her voice catching. I'm not proud of it either. I don't know if I can ever explain why I thought it was okay to try to take your house, your security. It seems so obviously wrong now. We all make mistakes, I said gently. Even terrible ones. What matters is what we learn from them and how we try to make amends. We didn't resolve everything that day, There were still difficult conversations ahead, trust to rebuild, boundaries to establish and respect. But in that moment, with her, acknowledgement of wrongdoing and genuine effort to make amends, I felt the first real healing in our fractured relationship. As I watched Sarah join her sons in the backyard later that afternoon, laughing as they showed her the fairy garden that had grown more elaborate with each visit, I thought about the document that had changed everything, the deed that had protected my home and my independence. But perhaps the real change hadn't come from the legal paper itself, but from what it had represented, my willingness, finally, to stand firm and protect what was mine, even against those I loved. That evening, after Sarah and Rob had left and the twins were asleep in their room, I climbed the stairs to the attic once more. The fireproof box still sat in its hiding place, now containing copies of updated legal documents along with precious family mementos. I added one more item, the check Sarah had insisted I accept, not because I intended to cash it, but because it represented something valuable, the beginning of her understanding, her acceptance of responsibility, her effort to make amends. Some wounds take time to heal, and some trust, once broken, can never be fully restored. But as I closed the box and returned it to its place, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in months. My home was secure, my boundaries respected, and the family I loved was finding its way back to connection. Different now, changed by conflict and resolution, but perhaps ultimately stronger for having weathered the storm. Spring arrived in Millfield, with an explosion of color. My garden, which had suffered during the months of family turmoil, flourished under my renewed attention. I planted more vegetables than usual this year: tomatoes, bell peppers, zucchini, and herbs that spread their fragrance through the air when brushed against. The physical labor of gardening had always been therapeutic for me, and now it served as a tangible reminder of my resilience and recovery. A year had passed since the confrontation that changed everything. The seasons had cycled through their changes, and so had my relationship with Sarah and her family. The twins, now 13, spent every other weekend with me, a routine that had become comfortable and anticipated. Sarah and Rob visited regularly, though our interactions maintained a careful politeness that acknowledged the breach of trust that still existed between us. They had settled into their rental house, a modest but adequate 3-bedroom with a small backyard where the boys could play. Rob's construction job had stabilized into a management position, and Sarah's work at the furniture store had expanded to include interior design consultations, a natural extension of her creative talents. They were, by all appearances, rebuilding their financial stability through hard work rather than shortcuts, a development that filled me with quiet pride despite our complicated history. One sunny Tuesday morning in April, I was kneeling in my garden, transplanting seedlings when a shadow fell across the soil beside me. I looked up to find my neighbor, Martha, standing at the garden fence, her expression troubled. "Eleanor, do you have a minute to talk?" she asked, her voice carrying that careful tone people use when delivering difficult news. I stood, brushing soil from my gardening gloves. "Of course. Is everything all right?" Martha had been my neighbor for over 20 years. She and her husband George had moved in when their children were teenagers, and we had shared countless cups of coffee and garden tips across our adjoining fences. She was not one for gossip or idle chatter, which made her serious demeanor concerning. "Saw Sarah at the supermarket yesterday," she began, once we were seated on my patio with glasses of iced tea. "She was talking to Diane Roberts. You know, from the real estate office downtown? I wouldn't have thought anything of it except I distinctly heard your address mentioned." My hand stilled around my glass. "My address? Are you sure?" Martha nodded, her gray curls bouncing slightly. "Positive. I was in the next aisle over looking at cereal when I heard Diane ask about your mother's property on Maple Street. Sarah was saying something about market value and potential listing timeline. A cold sensation spread through my chest despite the warm spring air. After all this time, after the apparent progress in rebuilding trust, was Sarah still plotting to get her hands on my house? Maybe I misunderstood, Martha added, seeing my expression. But I thought you should know. I thanked her for the information, assuring her that I would look into it. After she left, I sat motionless on the patio, trying to make sense of what I'd heard. My first instinct was to call Michael in Seattle, but I stopped myself. I had grown in the past year, learned to stand on my own 2 feet and address problems directly rather than looking for others to intervene. This situation, whatever it was, required the same approach. I reached for my phone and texted Sarah. Would you be able to stop by after work today? There's something I'd like to discuss with you. Her reply came quickly. Sure. Around 5:30, okay? The hours until her arrival crawled by. I tried to occupy myself with normal activities, finishing my gardening, preparing a casserole for dinner, reading a chapter of the mystery novel my book club was discussing that week, but my mind kept circling back to Martha's report. What possible reason could Sarah have for discussing my property with a real estate agent? At precisely 5:30, Sarah's car pulled into my driveway. She looked tired after a full day at work, but there was something else in her expression as she approached the door, a nervousness I couldn't immediately interpret. Is everything okay, Mom? She asked as I led her to the kitchen. Your message seemed serious. I decided to be direct. I heard something concerning today. Martha saw you talking to Diane Roberts about my house, specifically about its market, value, and a potential listing. I'd like to understand what that conversation was about. Sarah's face flushed, a reaction that could indicate either guilt or embarrassment. She sat down heavily at the kitchen table, running a hand through her hair, a gesture so reminiscent of her father that it momentarily distracted me from my suspicion. I was going to tell you this weekend, she said finally. I wanted to have all the information first, to present it properly. Tell me what exactly? I pressed, my guard still up. Sarah took a deep breath. Do you remember Mr. Levinson, the math teacher from the boys' school? The apparent non sequitur confused me. Yes, of course. Why? His wife passed away 3 months ago, breast cancer. They had 4 kids, the youngest still in middle school with the twins. He's drowning, Mom. Medical bills, funeral costs, trying to work full-time while caring for 4 grieving children. The school has been taking up collections, but it's a drop in the bucket compared to what they need. I nodded sympathetically, but failed to see the connection to my property. That's terrible, but what does it have to do with you discussing my house with a real estate agent? Sarah looked down at her hands. Diane Roberts is coordinating a fundraiser for the Levinson family. They're trying to help them keep their house, which is at risk of foreclosure. She approached me about contributing, and I mentioned that I had some experience with near foreclosure situations. She paused, seeming to gather courage before continuing. I told her that while we couldn't contribute much financially, I might have another way to help. I explained that my mother, you, owns her home outright and has considerable equity. I thought perhaps you might be willing to do a cash-out refinance to help the Levinsons with a loan. I stared at her, processing this explanation. It wasn't what I had feared. She wasn't plotting to take my house, but she was once again making presumptions about my financial decisions. Sarah, I said carefully, while I sympathize with the Levinson situation, why would you discuss my financial affairs with a stranger without speaking to me first? Especially given our history. She had the grace to look genuinely remorseful. I know it was wrong. I got caught up in the idea of helping them and thought, if I could present you with a fully formed plan, something that would make a real difference for this family while still protecting your interests, you might consider it. Diane is a financial advisor as well as a real estate agent. She was just helping me understand the mechanics of how it could work. And it didn't occur to you that after what happened last year, this might appear suspicious? I asked, unable to keep the hurt from my voice. That I might interpret this as another attempt to access the equity in my home? It should have, she admitted. I wasn't thinking clearly. I saw their situation, and it reminded me so much of where we were a year ago. The fear of losing their home, the impact on the children. But they're in this position through no fault of their own, just terrible medical bills and bad luck. I thought maybe you'd understand that difference. I sat back in my chair, studying my daughter's face. There was no defensive anger there, no manipulation, just genuine contrition for her thoughtlessness and sincere concern for a family in crisis. Perhaps this was progress of a sort. Her impulse had been to help others rather than herself. Even if her methods remained problematic, I appreciate your concern for the Levinson family, I said finally. But Sarah, my financial decisions are mine to make. If you want to discuss ways I might help them, you need to come to me directly, not consult with financial advisors about my property behind my back. You're right, she acknowledged immediately. I'm sorry. That was completely inappropriate. Of me. Her quick acceptance of responsibility was new, a departure from the defensive posturing that had characterized our conflicts in the past. It softened my response. Tell me more about the Levinson situation, I suggested. Not what you think I should do about it, just the facts as you understand them. Sarah described the family's circumstances in detail, 4 children ranging from 13 to 20, a mountain of medical debt from 2 years of cancer treatments, and a father struggling to keep everything together while grieving his wife. The oldest had deferred college to help at home, and they were at risk of losing the house they'd lived in for 15 years. As she spoke, I found myself remembering James and how he'd always emphasized the importance of community support in times of crisis. No one stands alone, he used to say. Today we help others. Tomorrow we might be the ones needing help. I'd like to think about how I might assist the Levinsons, I said when Sarah finished. But whatever I decide, it will be on my terms, not through arrangements made without my knowledge. Sarah nodded, relief evident in her posture. That's more than fair. And Mom, I really am sorry for overstepping. Again. Old habits die hard, I observed, but without rancor. Next time, just talk to me first. After Sarah left, I found myself surprisingly unbothered by the incident. A year ago, discovering she had been discussing my property with a real estate agent would have triggered panic and distrust. Now, I could see it for what it was. A well-intentioned but poorly executed attempt to help others. Not a scheme to benefit herself. That evening, I called Michael to update him on the situation, expecting him to share my cautious optimism about Sarah's evolving approach. I don't know, Mom, he said skeptically. It still sounds like boundary crossing to me. Discussing your finances with a stranger after everything that happened? It was, I agreed. But her intentions seemed different this time. She acknowledged her mistake immediately, without making excuses or trying to manipulate me. People don't change that fundamentally in a year, Michael argued. I just don't want to see you hurt again. His protectiveness touched me, but I found myself defending Sarah. A reversal of roles that would have seemed impossible a year earlier. People can change when they're forced to confront the consequences of their actions. Sarah lost a lot last year. Her easy access to my support, her comfortable living situation, even some of my trust. Those are powerful motivators for growth. After some reflection, I decided to make a modest donation to the Levinson Family Fund, nowhere near the core, substantial amount Sarah had envisioned through a refinance of my home, but enough to be meaningful. I hand-delivered the check to Diane Roberts at her office, introducing myself and making it clear that while I was happy to contribute, any future discussions involving my finances should include me from the outset. The incident proved to be a turning point in my relationship with Sarah. Rather than retreating into defensive silence as she might have done previously, She called me the following day to apologize again and to thank me for my contribution to the Levinsons. "I spoke with Diane," she said. "She told me you were very gracious but very clear about boundaries. I'm glad you were." I deserved that reminder. "We're all still learning," I replied, surprised by my own magnanimity. Finding new ways to interact takes time. 2 weeks later, Sarah invited me to Sunday dinner at their rental house, the first such invitation since they had moved out of my home. The small gesture signaled a shift, an acknowledgement that our relationship needed to be reciprocal rather than one-sided. Their rental was modest but well-maintained, with a small patch of lawn where the twins had set up a basketball hoop. Inside, I was struck by how different the space felt from their previous home. Gone were the expensive electronics and designer furnishings that had strained their budget. The furniture was simple and functional, the decor minimal but thoughtful. "You've made this place feel like a home," I observed as Sarah showed me around. "We've learned to work with what we have," she replied, with a self-awareness that caught me by surprise. "It turns out we don't need nearly as much as we thought we did." Dinner was a simple affair, a hearty chicken casserole similar to ones I had made countless times when Sarah was growing up. The conversation flowed more easily than it had in months, touching on the twins' school activities, Rob's work projects, and Sarah's new interest in budget-friendly interior design. As we sat around their kitchen table, smaller and less grand than the one they had aspired to in their previous home, I was struck by how much more genuine this gathering felt compared to the tense, performative family dinners of the past. "We have some news," Rob announced as Sarah brought out a homemade apple pie for dessert. "We've been approved for a mortgage." "You're buying a house?" I asked, immediately wary despite our recent progress. Sarah must have read my expression, because she quickly added, "A small one, within our means this time. The loan officer was very stringent about what we qualified for, and we didn't push for more." "We learned our lesson the hard way," Rob acknowledged. "This place is modest. 3 bedrooms, 1.5 baths. Needs some cosmetic updates, but nothing structural. The payment will actually be less than what we're paying in rent now." I felt a surge of genuine happiness for them. "That's wonderful news. When would you move?" "Closing is in 6 weeks," Sarah explained. "We didn't want to say anything until it was certain, after what happened last time." She let the sentence trail off, but the implication was clear. They were conscious of their previous financial overreach and determined not to repeat those mistakes. "The best part," Rob continued, "is that we're qualifying for this on our own. No help, no bailouts. We've rebuilt our credit and saved a proper down payment. It's taken longer than we hoped, but it feels right this time." The pride in his voice was evident, and justifiably so. They had faced the consequences of their poor financial decisions, adjusted their expectations, and worked their way back to stability through discipline rather than shortcuts. "I'm proud of you both," I said sincerely. "It takes courage to start over and do things differently." As the evening concluded and I prepared to leave, Sarah walked me to my car. The spring night was mild, scented with blooming jasmine from a neighbor's yard. For a moment, we stood in comfortable silence, a rare occurrence in our often tense relationship. "I don't think I ever properly apologized," Sarah said suddenly, "for what we tried to do with your house. Not just the eviction papers and the manipulation, all of it, moving in with the expectation of taking over, treating your home like it was already ours to claim." I leaned against my car, giving her my full attention. This was the straightforward acknowledgement she had never quite managed to articulate before. "At the time, I convinced myself it was reasonable," she continued, "that we deserved it somehow, that you owed us. I can't explain why I thought that way. It seems so obviously wrong now." "Fear does strange things to people," I offered, finding compassion easier than I would have thought possible a year ago. "You were afraid of losing your home, your stability." "That's no excuse," she said firmly. We were adults making calculated decisions to take advantage of you. I'm deeply ashamed of that now. Her candor moved me. Thank you for saying that. It means a lot to hear you acknowledge it so clearly. I've been seeing a therapist, she confessed, trying to understand why I felt entitled to your property, why I could justify treating my own mother that way. It's been illuminating, not comfortable, but necessary. This revelation surprised me. Sarah had always dismissed therapy as not for people like us, viewing it as a sign of weakness rather than strength. That takes courage, I told her. Real courage. She smiled ruefully. Less courage than facing the consequences of continuing as I was. I nearly lost my relationship with you. The boys were confused and hurting. My marriage was strained by the financial stress and the conflict with you. Something had to change. And it wasn't going to be everyone else. As I drove home that night, I reflected on the journey of the past year. The document that had changed everything, my deed, had protected my legal ownership of my house. But the real change had come afterward, in the painful but necessary rebuilding of trust and establishment of healthy boundaries. When I arrived home, I stood in my driveway for a moment, looking at the house that had nearly torn my family apart. Its familiar shape in the moonlight represented so much more than bricks and mortar. It was security, independence, the physical manifestation of decades of hard work and wise choices. I had protected my home, yes. But more importantly, I had protected my dignity and self-determination. In doing so, I had inadvertently taught my daughter one of life's most valuable lessons. Respect is earned through honesty and integrity, not demanded through manipulation and force. The house that had almost divided us had, in the end, become the catalyst for a more authentic connection. One built on mutual respect rather than obligation or entitlement. Not perfect, still fragile. In places, but genuine in a way our relationship had never been before. I climbed the steps to my front porch, keys in hand. My home, my sanctuary, my choice. Tomorrow the twins would visit for the weekend. Sarah and Rob would come for Sunday lunch before taking them home. Michael had planned a visit for the following month. Life continued its forward motion. Relationships, evolved and healing, slow but steady, remained possible even after the deepest wounds. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.